Thank you so much for coming up. Can we have a round of applause for Dominic as he walks to the stage? So when did you get to Edinburgh today again?
11 o'clock?
11 o'clock. So it's been a long day. A longish day.
A little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So working backwards, you would have got the train at what, like 7:30?
Earlier.
Okay, that's a long day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming up and talking about. I mean, I've followed you on Twitter for so long, and you've kind of seen all of the projects you've been built. And I think it's just great to see stuff being built that's used out there because, well, it's awesome. I will shut up now. Let me check this is actually working. Okay. Are you happy to just take it away? I think if you stand over here for the video, that would be awesome. But
Okay.
I'll hold on. Oh, and you're okay to take questions of things throughout.
Yeah, so please just ask me questions whenever. You can you don't need to put your hand up, just speak, really.
What I would say is if you do have a question, we need this for the people in the Zoom to hear it. So either if you can repeat it back or if you can use this, then that would be awesome. Okay. I'm going to skulk over here.
Okay.
I need to learn to moonwalk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dominic. You might see me on the internet as Dominic or Norton or Mr. Hackathon. There's stories behind that, but we might get into that a little bit later. I am going to give you an overview and an introduction into building software without coding. And I haven't used, some of you might know the no-code term, I haven't used that purposefully. We're going to get to that point. But right now, all you have to know is I'm going to introduce you to building software without coding. We're going to go over some projects I've built. We're going to go over different parts of building software without coding and different segments of the whole ecosystem. And this is like I'm assuming people don't know anything. That's the area I'm coming in with, so we can all have a good basis for conversations. About me. My name's Dominic, or Mr. Hackathon. My journey into no-code and building software actually started with HTML and CSS on MySpace. So when MySpace was big, I was in early secondary school and late primary school, and what people used to do, they used to make custom layouts for money, and I used to want money so I can buy sweets and chicken and chips. And I used to make them, and at that time I didn't know I was programming, well, if you can call it programming, with HTML and CSS, but that's what we was doing, or that's what we were doing. But also around this same time, probably a little bit earlier than secondary school, my mom would put me in summer classes. And at that time, Adobe Dreamweaver was big, and we was doing visual development with Adobe Dreamweaver. Again, at the time, I didn't really know. I was building websites, I was just having fun. But now I look back on it, I was doing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now. But my journey took different diversions to get where I am. So I grew up as an international athlete. I played for the English national team. I ended up getting a scholarship to go to university in America. I was in America for five years, playing basketball there. I played for teams out here too. When I went to America, what I actually studied was architecture and construction. So on the architecture side, I was really, really designy, but I was more technical than some of my peers. So I actually picked up a construction degree too, but I really hated being on site. So there was lots of practical stuff, lots of like real experience. I hated it. I actually went into the field as what's called a virtual design construction engineer, which I'm dealing with drones, VR, AR, 3D printers, like the technology side of architecture and construction. And this is where I am touching on programming for parametric designs for a lot of these big companies. They're using algorithms to try and create buildings, try and make buildings more efficient. But I wasn't necessarily coding. I was remixing code. I was dragging and dropping blocks on software. And this is like my early entry into no code too, a little bit later than the Dreamweaver stuff. What I do now, I'm actually, for a year, I've been working as a product manager for a software company. I'm a cybersecurity product manager, but what I do outside of my 9 to 5, I make content for MakerPad, which is a community. I make their TikTok content. I'm on the C-suite for a incubator in America, and I help their portfolio companies utilize NoCode to be able to iterate quicker. I'm a creator in residence. Max was mentioned a little bit earlier for 100 days of NoCode. These are different communities, so we're going to go over this in a little bit. And I'm a fellow on Deck. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot out the questions. In today's conversation, we're going to go a little bit over what the problem is. Why are we even here talking about NoCode? We're going to talk about the different segments of NoCode or creating software without coding. We're going to talk about opportunities and careers in the space. We're going to talk about different communities too. So traditionally, there has been some difficulties in creating software, at least for the average person. It's been expensive, it's been a part of a specialist skill set, and it's been extremely time consuming. So over time, it's got more and more easy to create software, not just without coding, but with coding too. And what we're seeing in the last 10 years or so is a lot more platforms come out to try and build software without coding and try and reduce the effects of these. So creating software is getting cheaper. More people are being able to do it without the specialist knowledge, and people are being able to do it a lot quicker. This is where the term no-code comes in. And no-code, or sometimes it can be called visual development, is more like an umbrella term for products that enable users to develop software with minimal coding experience. Now, sometimes this can be deceptive, and I see on Twitter people talk about this all the time. There's code somewhere. It's just you haven't created it. And you're generally using building blocks to put things together. And also, sometimes this no-code term is not strictly no-code. You can add code, you can add JavaScript, you can add different things, you can remix. So it's not a fixed term, it's more like a general umbrella term. Does anyone have any questions so far? So going forward, I'll use this term no-code. If anyone has any questions about it, please just let me know. So we're going to go over some of the technologies because, again, for this umbrella term, you have so many different segments. In most communities, we usually talk about website builders, but website builders are not the only part of this no-code ecosystem. So we'll start with website builders. You've probably seen adverts for Squarespace or maybe Wix potentially, and these are the most common. These have been around for some time. They have different pros and cons from pricing. Some of them target agencies, some of them target individual founders and for small businesses. But these are for you to actually build websites. So there's some people running agencies and building websites for small businesses. Sometimes a founder is building a website for themselves and for the company and for the startup they're creating. I think that's pretty straightforward. I think moving on to automation tools like Zapier, Parabola, Integromat, these are tools that are connecting different services. So you might connect Google Sheets to Twitter, or you might create SendFox, which is for like marketing campaigns and emails, to, I don't know, to Trello. There's different services you can connect to each other, and these automation tools act as the glue. So in a lot of companies today, I suspect many are using automation tools. Many are using automation tools, and they don't know it's a part of the no-code ecosystem when it is. And they don't have to know, but what it proves, there's a lot more people within the no-code community that are utilizing no-code tools than they actually know about. Question? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Is it possible to time videos and link it to Instagram for?
I'm not sure about Instagram. So I commonly use Zapier. I haven't seen no Instagram connection to Zapier.
If we can make videos and automate the timing, they can post on on the time you have set.
Technically, you could probably do it. I just haven't connected anything to Instagram. I commonly would connect something to Twitter. It's probably the easiest. I know you can do it with Facebook relatively easy. I haven't seen any, with Zapier specifically, I haven't seen anything with like TikTok or Instagram, but I suspect in some creative way you probably could do it because you have tools like Hootsuite that are doing it. So I suspect there is a way. Does anyone have any questions on website builders or automation tools? Okay, moving to virtual and augmented reality. So this is kind of one of the places that I started at, especially coming from like as architectural technology space. But what you see is Snapchat, Lens Studio, AR Spark or Spark AR with Instagram, TikTok Effect House, which is still in beta, but you're able to create and now monetize filters without coding at all. Now you can add logic. I'm not sure how many people actually use this in these communities, but in the filters, you can create mini games and logic just by dragging and dropping. And this is what we're talking about, visual development. I suspect we're going to see virtual and augmented reality grow even more as you're hearing about talks of AR glasses and different companies trying to push into that space. You have this whole Web3 thing going on and they're trying to blend realities. And it's getting easier and easier for creators to create experiences using VR and AR. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any augmented reality or virtual reality no-code tools that you could recommend yet?
Yeah, so TikTok Effect House, that's for TikTok filters. That's currently in beta, so I'm in it now. I'm not sure how long it takes to get in that, but you have Spark AR for Instagram and Lens Studio for Snapchat. I think there's another called Adobe Aero. The issue that I have with some of the other ones is that their experiences are limited to their platform and they don't have a big distribution. So for me to share an experience with you from Adobe Aero, you have to be a part of that network. And there's just not a large distribution for that. But it's as simple as with any of them. I think one of the easiest filters I created is like face filter. And basically they give you like a mesh. I have an iPad, so you can just mark up on the mesh and you just follow the tutorial, put the mesh on, and you have a filter within, I say within hour, but at least a weekend you can have a filter done. So, is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. So gaming, this is something I've been particularly interested. This is probably where I find the most fun in the no-code space in gaming. The tool I use the most is BuildBox. I've used flowlab.io, which is fun too, but it's a little bit different. BuildBox for hyper-casual games. I didn't put anything in the projects for gaming, but if you ask me afterwards, I can show you some of the games that I've made. That's really interesting, and one of the reasons I'm passionate about lowering the barrier for gaming, because there's so many stories not being told, so many creators that can create and tell stories through gaming. And what no-code tools in the gaming space can allow you to do is tell stories, tell your experiences, and create new experience than what's typically shown. Web3, this is all the hype right now. So you can make smart contracts without OpenZeppelin. You can make smart contracts without coding. You can make tokens without coding. You can make websites without coding, like mint sites without coding. And there's a lot of tools emerging day and day in the Web3 space, chatbots and voice applications. So I personally haven't had much success with voice applications. I've created a few that have been fun, but I haven't had much like user success. But at least what statistics show about Alexa and Google is that there are a lot of people using their devices. They do have an ecosystem of apps, and it is relatively easy to create chatbots for Alexa and Google, but not forgetting Facebook too. So if you go on a lot of business websites today, they should, when you hit their business Facebook pages, they should open the chat and there's some automated workflow. It's relatively easy for you to create that. At one point, I want to say it was pre-pandemic. Maybe I was still in university, so it might have been like 2017 potentially. There was lots of people coming out making chatbots for businesses as like a business venture. I'm not sure people are still doing that, but it was booming. Databases, so we saw Xano, but you have stuff like Airtable. I think Backendless is another one. There's lots of tools coming out that allow you to add more functionality and more complexity to your databases when it comes to no-code tools. One of the difficulties with some no-code tools is that when it comes to actually managing data, it can be very difficult to manage data independently of that platform. So there's a whole suite of tools coming out that try to manage that for you. And what it does actually replicate is starting to replicate more what you would program. And what you would program, you would have the backend team or the backend database, MongoDB, whatever you want to use, that's managing the data, and you would have the front end frameworks, and the no-code ecosystem is starting to look like that, especially as your use case scales up and your usage scales up. And mobile applications. So I actually have one of my mobile applications in the project section, but I like Adalo the most, but you have tools like Flutterflow. You can actually make mobile applications with Bubble. And these are all tools to make mobile applications relatively easy. They mentioned a little bit earlier AI, and we was discussing about AI earlier. I've had access to OpenAI and GTP3 for, I don't know, a very long time. I haven't done much with it outside their sandbox, but when you talk about, at least with OpenAI, when you talk about control, they are very strict about what you can use it for. And they're explicitly strict about what you can use it for. Even what you type in, if you type in something and the algorithm says, oh, it puts a declaration that, oh, this is not something you should be using it for. So it's interesting. I don't think it's perfect, but it's interesting to play with. We actually, me and Dan do have friends that have been successful with OpenAI. They've sold projects with OpenAI. So it's interesting if you want to go down that route. Does anyone have any questions on just some of these? There's so many more, but I guess this would be a good break point just to talk about maybe some things you're interested in, some thoughts you've had, any concerns you've had, or challenges you had with some of these technologies.
Well, I wanted to create a personal website from a long time for recruiters and employers, because I think CV, and nowadays it's quite limited of what it can present. Basically, if I want to let my employer know that I'm not just these bullet points, website can create an experience, maybe a gamified version. And the website can create an experience which can provide someone that, okay, this is this guy's personality, this is his experience, these are projects, these are photographs, okay, this looks great. But, well, as you said, it used to be expensive, specialized, and so that's why that stopped me. But I think this is great. Now I can build a personal website.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the goal. And I think, and you'll see with some of my projects actually, I think one of the biggest things about all these technologies and lowering the barrier to entry, one, that you have lots of ideas and you can build a lot more, but two, you can get caught into building mode. And if you want the project to be viable and sustainable, it's just, and Dan's going to talk about this a lot, I suspect, it's about talking to the users and talking to the customers. Because it's got easier, you can over-engineer things. And with programming, we see that anyway. I see that on a day-to-day basis with programming. But with no code, it's very easy to create a mobile application and add 10,000 features because it's easier to do that now. You just have to make sure you're not over-engineering and what's the core problem that the user wants to solve and what's the core outcome they want to achieve, and doubling down on that and focusing directly on that.
I was like, do you think most no-code tools are better for like B2B products or B2C just generally?
I think it's just a tool. I'm trying to think of ones where it would satisfy B2B. I'm not sure if it answers your question directly, but ones I found more friendly is dependent on the pricing plan. So B2B, if I'm working for my company and we're using a no-code tool for another company, for me, sometimes Bubble, especially with the changes they made recently, or Webflow can be more expensive than something else. And I take that into consideration on what tool I'm using. Like, how long is it going to take me to get to making money for this? If I'm paying 40 or 50 a month for this subscription, how many months can I realistically pay for that? And especially with me, I make lots of projects. Can I do that again and again and again? And some tools just don't allow you that level of flexibility. I think to answer your question, I think the tools are just tools. I mean, Webflow, it can be for B2B or it could be for B2C. It's just a tool.
So, like, my question regarding like the scaling limitations. So, just like to give the small context, and I think I asked Ole already about this question before. Like, I have already a small business, e-commerce, and I built it like based on WooCommerce, WordPress, and then I have an argument with my the other co-founders that, oh, let's move to Shopify. And I told him like, okay, we are scaling so fast, let's keep it on WordPress because I think just like owning the source and whatever, it's better for us than just like moving to Shopify and then we can just like do our own thing later. I don't know. So we have like this problem every time, just like the scaling thing, just the scaling limitation, when just like most of the tools give me a very like limited maybe feature for scaling later or moving to a different software or even like moving like to my not a platform but like my from scratch coding stuff like or software or programming or whatever. So scaling limitation, what other limitation like with the scaling?
So I actually heard a couple things there. So typically when people ask about scaling, at least when they ask me about scaling, it's usually, I think the conversation you're having about scaling is different to what people are saying. People usually bring up scaling in terms of user base. Like, I don't know, I have an app and can it satisfy millions of users like Facebook could satisfy or Instagram to satisfy? My usual answer to that, if I get to that point, it's a whole different discussion. You know, it's a different discussion because one, if I want to change and I want to go to something else, I have leverage now if I want to get VC funding or if I want to go, so I have leverage. If I have millions of users, usually at the beginning part, it's usually best. But I think the discussion you're having is slightly different because when you're talking about scaling, you're more talking about ownership of the code. Is that what you're talking about? Now, thinking about some of the platforms, probably 75% of them don't allow you to own your code. And there's some that I can't pronounce it. I would have to send it to you, but I know one specifically, highly scalable in terms of user base and activity, but it also allows you to export the code if you want to export the code. For example, when I talk about mobile application, I say Adala is the best. I don't own the code. And there's some that allows you to own the code too. But I think that's what you're talking about. There's some platforms, but you have to trade off. With owning the code, there's maintaining the code too, and that's the cost you have to weigh up. Is it worth maintaining this code that we now own? Which is the same question you have if you hire developers or you develop in-house. It's not just developing, it's maintaining it when it goes wrong. And especially as a business, that's what you have to weigh up. But there are tools. I wouldn't say it's the majority of the ecosystem allows you to own the code, but there are plenty of tools that allow you to own the code.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if we could do one more question, but we should probably
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I was just like to share, like, I try to build an mobile applications and connect it to a database using no code. I have no strong background in coding, and it's like it doesn't work. It just failed after a few tries, or like if I start to make it more complicated. And you're saying something about over-engineering. It's like, how do we know when we actually over-engineer it? Because coming from non-tech background, it could be like, it's like we could miss it, totally miss it.
But the over-engineering is not necessarily about the tech, it's about the user. What's the core problem the user's trying to solve? And now if the core problem is they're just trying to find businesses and you're adding chat functionality and you're adding all this different function, that's all stuff that your user really doesn't need to solve their problem. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about over-engineering. But there's also another point, which is a little bit difficult for non-technical people. Even though we said no code, there's still principles to like designing good applications or good software. If you don't design the database in a way that makes sense or in a way that's easy, it's still going to fail. But it's just, you have the same problems as coding. Like I have teams and we go, and some of the biggest banks in the world, some of their systems, they find it very hard to change because when it was originally designed, it wasn't designed for what they use it for now. And that's a part of it. I think it's hard to pick up or hard to communicate, but whether you use code or no code, it's a mutual problem in how you design the structure of your software. So careers and opportunities. So I'm not sure, how long have we got?
I left my phone up there, so
Oh.
I can't quite remember the agenda, but I think probably another 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. So there's only a couple more slides left. So careers and opportunities. So the first one has citizen developer. So this citizen developer term is basically, if you're using NoCode tools or you're innovating inside your company, you are a citizen developer of some sort. So you might be using automation tools somehow. There's probably something you're doing that probably hasn't been approved by IT, but it's making your workflow a lot easier. You're a citizen developer. And we suspect that there's going to be a rise in citizen developers, especially as no-code tools become easier to use and more widely accepted. A freelance developer, so especially with Bubble and Webflow, you can probably argue they're the two biggest platforms, at least in terms of communities. There are so many people looking for no-code developers, and there's not enough no-code developers. And there's a lot of friends we have that are making decent money as a freelance developer and actually getting clients and doing that full time. I have an agency managing director. So there are people within our communities that have agencies. So they might not be doing the day-to-day work of the freelance developer, but they're outsourcing the work to other freelancers, or they're outsourcing the work to people that they directly hire. You have a no-code developer. So I kind of segment this from freelance developer because something I do now, that I call myself a no-code developer, I make products for myself. I make like small hobby products. I haven't really within the last year took on any work externally. You have a founder. So you can either bootstrap or VC back. You have people that are jumping into no code to actually build a startup, either build it to raise money or build it just to have, what they call a side hustle now, or have this type of business. A content creator and instructor. So I do have a YouTube channel. I do make the content for MakerPad, for TikTok, on TikTok, where I'm creating content, I'm teaching. There's still a huge opportunity. I would actually say there's nowhere near enough content creators. If some of you have actually tried to program and you see how many JavaScript developers there are, and Python, and all across the board, the no-code ecosystem's not like that. There's a very, very limited amount of content creators. We all know each other. We all share tips. It's a very, very small pool, and there's a lot more tools than there are developers actually creating content to teach people how to use them. And a hobbyist. And I think this is the biggest opportunity for no-code. What I actually envision is people making SaaS products for their family, or people making apps, education apps to teach their kids something. That's where I see part of the no-code ecosystem and no-code tools being the most powerful, is like everyday use cases for everyday people instead of trying to build $1 billion company or multi-million-dollar company. So 10 minutes. So communities. Communities is a big thing in the no-code ecosystem. You can really 10x how much you're learning by just joining the community. Here are some communities I recommend. There are probably a lot more. So I came through a program called On Deck. I'm not sure when, probably about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago. Now, On Deck is a part, I came through On Deck No Code, their first cohort, but they have lots of different sub-communities where they bring people together from various different backgrounds, and you go through this program. They have expert speakers, you produce a capstone project, you present your capstone project, and it's to get you in the habit of making, but the most important thing I gained from it is networking. So being able to know all these different people, people from the Philippines, people from India, people that have gone on to work for On Deck, and now some of them are even starting funds, and it brings you all together in this, around this kind of no-code technology. 100 Days of No-Code. So 100 Days of No-Code, I'm a creator in residence there. And 100 Days of No-Code is a creative challenge to do a little bit. I think it's about 10 minutes every day. So if the premise is doing a little bit every day, by the end of the 100 days, you should not only have a portfolio of products, but you should have a community you've built with and a knowledge base and great foundation to then go on and do whatever you want to do with that. MakerPad. MakerPad was, within the last year, it was bought by Zapier, which is a $1 billion company. But MakerPad is also a great community. They have lots of free tutorials. They have paid tutorials too, well, like a membership kind of thing where you can access additional tutorials. But it's another great community. Those are free, well, On Deck's not specifically no-code, but they have the no-code sub-community. The last two are Indie Hackers and Product Hunt. So I think Indie Hackers and Product Hunt are great to look at. Indie Hackers is more about business, entrepreneurship, side projects. At least those are the streams I follow. Indie Hackers is great. It was started by an entrepreneur. He raised up the company and is providing access to key knowledge for lots of entrepreneurs worldwide. And Product Hunt is definitely a place to look at. It's where a lot of entrepreneurs are launching, especially indie entrepreneurs, are launching projects. So every day they're launching projects. The way it kind of works, you upvote the ones you like the most, and at the end of the day, you'll see your list of ranked projects. But just go in there and looking at what people are working on, looking at how they're pitching their ideas, looking at their stories is very interesting, and you're going to learn a lot from just being a part of these communities, following these people on Twitter and seeing what they're saying and thinking about. So projects, interesting. I believe I actually took this project down from both the Google Play and App Store. This was one of the first ones I launched from Odalo, and I used it as a tutorial, but it was basically just to find scholarships. One of the easier apps I make is directory apps, and especially niche directory apps. And I made this as a tutorial, and I was playing around with features, deployed it to both the Google Play and App Store. Was very interesting. But this is just a cover image. I just put it there to fill the space. Missing Black people. So in April 2021, we're in 22 now, I launched Missing Black People, which is a curated directory of missing Black people. In the UK. It got lots of traction. It was featured by ITV, it was featured by Vice, it was featured by lots of different outlets. We started working with the police and being like a central point. So the community will come to us before they often go to the police, and the police will actually come to us before they go to the community. And so we act like as a way to distribute information. We're connected with a lot of the grassroots organizations within the Black community. So we're always sharing information on whether someone's going missing, if someone needs legal aid, if they need any kind of other assistance. We're working with a lot of community partners to be able to do that. But that was launched, this website was launched with Softer, but I believe it was a Thursday night, or maybe it was a Friday night, and I was just on a PlayStation and I was looking at Twitter. People were talking about how Black voices are not being heard, and I was like, I can make a website to resolve that relatively quickly. And I think I launched it that Friday night, and over the weekend it went viral. And I'm not saying that's the rule of thumb. That rarely happens, especially with my projects, but I think it's a testament to one, no code, but two, to actually building and shipping a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of projects. I ship a lot of things I see. I'm like, okay, I think I can build something that makes people's lives a little bit easier, at least a tad easier using no code. And I ship it, and some of the things really take off, and some of the things don't at all. So this was one of the projects that, and this is still going on today. Crypto scam detector. So week on week, we've been growing in active users, which is especially interesting because I don't market this that much. So it's all organic in the Chrome web store. This was made using Builder, and I believe I have some tutorials on this too. But it's basically a Chrome extension that tells you whether this website's a scam or not. So I source all the information from CoinMarketCap, or most of the information from CoinMarketCap or trusted sources, curate it into one database. And if it's not in this database, I say this website's not been verified. And if it is in the database, I say, hey, this website's safe. Very, very simple, very easy. Been growing week on week. I made this using a tool called Builder. I think Builder's I don't want to say it's the only tool, but I do think it's the only tool that allows you to really, really easily create Chrome extensions. So there's a whole thing about Chrome extension, and a lot of influencers on Twitter have been, especially in the no-code space, have been talking about it. There's lots of underserved markets in, I'm not sure if it's to call it underserved markets, but when you talk about the Chrome web store, when you talk about voice applications, there's lots of areas that are underserved where it's relatively low-hanging fruit, and the Chrome web store and Google Chrome is one of those. So this is an interesting project, and every week we're growing in active users, which is especially interesting. And this is something in the Android store. So if you have an Android, you should be able to find this. You should be able to find it. I wouldn't say it's optimized very well in the Google Play Store, but this is a directory of Web3 resources. So you have about, you have crypto coins, I've categorized it, and you have DeFi, you have DAOs, you have bounty programs, careers, grants, and it's just a directory. And relatively simple. Again, this is something that's been growing in weekly active users every week. Relatively simple, made in $1. So, yeah. I've been talking forever. Does anyone have any final question? We could probably talk at the end. I'm not sure if we went over time.
I'm not
Yeah.
just now, and then we should probably
Yeah.
keep moving things maybe. One of the mics here. Don't know where the other one went. We've got it.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Wait, I've wrote it down. I'll pick it up. You talked a bit about OpenAI and how you were sort of limited in what you could do with it. Mm-hmm. With other sort of applications, have you seen other no-code tools limiting the users and sort of being almost responsible for what the users are making? Or are most of them saying, we're not really responsible, we're just a tool, you go away and build whatever you want?
I think AI is different though.
Okay.
Adalo is not saying you pretty much can make any app, software, all of them. But I say you can make any app, but the founders are very close to the a lot of them, the founders are very close. If I can't say they would just, if you make something really weird, they will just say no. But I suspect, knowing some of the founders, they will be a bit hesitant to allow that to just go. AI is completely different. So OpenAI is very, very strict. They have very worldwide known, huge investors. I've used something called Obviously.ai, which is more data science than AI. You can put huge data sets in and do predictive modeling. And I've experimented with stuff where I'm like, this might be a little bit, this can be dangerous. But it's also how you use it. They haven't restricted anything. OpenAI, yes. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dominic. That was such a great overview. There's so many things I want to play with like baking games and even chatbots. And I will play with AI at some point and make some horrendous algorithm for something. But could we just, one more round of applause for Dominic to say thank you.